Thank you, worship team. That was fantastic. Really, really good. The offering bucket's just coming around. If you have cash offerings, feel free to throw those in. Otherwise, it's the welcome cards. You know the drill. Alright. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Harrison. I'm one of the elders here, and it's an honour to bring you God's word today. I'm just going to open in prayer, and then we'll get straight into it. So, Father God, I thank you for your presence here this morning. Thank you that we can come and be with you. Lord, I pray, speak through me this morning. This is your message. I give it to you, and speak into people's hearts. In Jesus' name. Amen. Alright. So, I've known for several months that I'll be preaching my next message in May. And for almost as long, I've known that that message would be out of Daniel chapter 3. So if you've got your Bibles today, feel free to open to Daniel chapter 3, otherwise you can follow on the screen. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold image 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it upon a plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments, you are to bow down to the ground and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold image. Anyone who refuses to bow down will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race, nation, or language, bowed down to the ground and worshipped the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Oops. I just want to pause here for a moment and let's think about what's happening. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and one of the things that the Babylonians really liked to do was to conquer other nations, take captives and bring them back to Babylon. And that's a really nice sanitary way to say that. This morning, I want to make the story come alive a little bit to you, so I'm going to unsanitize it for you. When the Babylonians came and conquered your city, here's what they did. After they killed all of the soldiers that were defending you, they would divide the civilians into several groups. Anyone under the age of 8 or over the age of 30 was killed immediately because they were too young or too old to be useful as a slave. Women between the ages of 8 and 30 were considered property and handed over to the soldiers to be raped. Men between the ages of 8 and 30 would be taken as slaves back to Babylon. Common men were put to work as household servants and farm hands, doing the jobs that the Babylonians considered beneath them. If you were lucky enough to be educated, you could read and write. Then you had opportunity. You could prove your worth to the Babylonians by demonstrating wisdom and knowledge. And those who excelled in knowledge and wisdom would be elevated to positions of leadership, even though they were technically slaves. However, to ensure that these educated captives would never consider themselves equal to or better than their captors, the Babylonians would ensure that their spirit was completely broken. So before being given the opportunity to prove their worth, each educated male captive was held down by a group of soldiers, while another soldier forcibly castrated them with a couple of stones. So with that in mind, let's have another think about what we've just read. The Babylonian king has created an enormous image and brought all of his educated captives to the dedication of his new image. He then issues a command intended to break any remaining will that his captives might have, by instructing them to worship the image or be killed horribly. And everybody there says to themselves, well, we might as well. We've endured so much already. Our children have been killed, our wives have been raped. We've been castrated by rocks, and we will never see our homes again. So what does it matter if we give up our gods too? They've clearly given up on us, and at least we get to live. So the people have given up. Their spirits are broken, and they've decided they've gone through enough torment, pain, and hardship, and they're just going to bow to the image and live their lives under the thumb of the Lord and King. It's not the life they wanted, but at least they get to live, right? All the people except three. One of my favourite preachers, Cole Stringer, calls them my shack, your shack, and a bungalow. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow, and we'll see reading on from verse 8. But some astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said, King Nebuchadnezzar, long live the king. You have issued a decree requiring that all people bow down and worship the gold image when they hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments. There's got to be a quicker way to say that. The decree also states that those who refuse to obey will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I almost said a bungalow, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold image that you have set up. Then King Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold image that I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the image that I have made, when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And this is right where Nebuchadnezzar crosses the line. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? Here's my favourite bit. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, then the God whom we serve is able to save us, and he will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, we want to make it clear, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods, nor worship the gold image that you have set up. These three men chose to stand. I don't know if that's what they look like. I got Chpt to generate that image. But let's pause again and bring this story to life a bit more. Here's these three guys. They've been through the same things that everyone else has been through. They watched helplessly while their children were murdered, their wives were raped. They had to endure the physical and psychological pain of having their manhood destroyed. They've been taken from their homes against their will. And yet, when everyone else is bowing to the image, these men have chosen to stand. Now, I don't know how you imagine it, but in my head, when I read this story, I picture a huge outdoor arena with the image at one end and a great multitude bowing before it. Sort of like the pictures you see of Ramadan in Mecca or St. Peter's in Vatican. And it's not as though Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing in the middle of this arena and everyone's bowing around them. Because the king didn't see them to start with. They were off to the side. They were trying to keep it a bit quiet. But then someone who wanted to curry them a favour points them out and says, hey, what about those guys? They're not doing what you said. And so the king has them brought before him. And just to put it in some modern language, the king says, what's going on? You guys, you must have come late. That must be what it is. It's that herald who's got a weird accent, I understand. It's hard to understand. But this is your last chance. No more misunderstandings, because you're hearing it from my own mouth. The king is saying, it doesn't matter what you believe in private. That's fine. You do whatever you want to do in your own heart and in your own mind. But here in public, when the music plays, you will bow to the image or we will end you. Just a quick thought coming out of the story. I want you all to take a second and think about what the image might be in the modern world. Here today, 2024 in Highfields, what is the image that the whole world is bowing to? Even a lot of the Christian world. And is insisting that you bow as well. Just go like that, settle on the room and you can think about it. But my favourite part of the story, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego reply to the king, and in a bit of modern language, no, it's all right, we heard you. We're not here to make excuses. We've come before you to say that our God, that we serve, the one true God, not only is he able to save us, but we are confident that he will save us from you. But even if he doesn't, even if it looks like to you that we missed it, or that God didn't come through for us in this instance, we want you to know and understand something, O King Nebuchadnezzar. We would rather burn in your fire than bow to your stinking image. And if that doesn't inspire you and stir you up a little bit inside, just lean across and ask the person next to you to check your pulse. Because that's the kind of faith that should stir something in your spirit. It says, yes, this is how life is meant to be lived. Standing side by side with your two closest friends, supporting one another as you stare down the powers of this world, who demand you bow to their image. And together you look them in the eye and say, no. It doesn't matter what you do to us. We will not bow to your image. Sorry, I'm a little bit excited there. Let's get back to the story. Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and ordered some of his strongest soldiers to bind Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego and throw them into the furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, you certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire, unharmed. And the 4th looks like the son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, their clothing was not scorched, they did not even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be burned into heaps of rubble. For there is no other God who can rescue like this." He was a violent man, isn't he? Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. I don't think this section of the story needs a whole lot more clarity. I think it's fairly clear what's happening here. But I do want to pull out some of the symbolism. First, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being bound, tied up with ropes, by the strongest soldiers in the army. And so when we stand and refuse to bow to the image that the world is presented to us, They'll take their strongest, most effective weapons and use them to tie us up, make us immobile. Using things like the call of public opinion, protests, false accusations, social media, real media, anything they can to make us constricted, less able to move. Once they were tied up, Chpt, Chpt were thrown into the fire, which is so hot that it kills the soldiers who took them there. Bringing this into the same metaphor, we can see that the very weapons that are employed to destroy us and make us immobile are destroyed by the heat of the flames. Now, it's not clear in the story how much time passes between getting thrown in the fire and Nebuchadnezzar seeing 4 men. But there's certainly some amount of time, it's not instant. And the king looks up and can't believe his eyes, because there's suddenly a 4th man in the fire. And the ropes that tied the 3 are gone. So these 3 men meet with Jesus in the fire. Now, was it Jesus, was it an angel? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to say Jesus for this. And when you stand against the image, you'll go through increasing levels of discomfort. You'll be called out. You'll be threatened. You'll be tied up. You'll be thrown into the fire. You'll experience all of that. Embarrassment, intimidation, restriction, heat. And just when you're about to be fully destroyed, Jesus appears in the fire. Do you ever wonder what they talk about in the fire? After the ropes burn away, Chpt, Chpt stand up. What do they say to each other? I reckon there's quite a bit of time going. And in the middle of their eyes falling out of their heads, Jesus appears and says, "It's a bit warm in here, fellas. Did you get the heater on?" And so all 3 of them get to spend time with Jesus. In the middle of their punishment, Jesus is there and they are protected from it. And then they get called out again. Only this time there's no anger in the voice. Instead, it's an element of reverence as the king says, "Come out." And I don't know about you, but if I was there, I've said, "No, come in. It's lovely." What I'd like to highlight is that even though 4 men were in the fire, only 3 came out. Jesus is still in the fire. And we don't need to be afraid of the flames because God is in them. And He will not let us be destroyed. And I'm sure that when they did come out, Chpt, Chpt weren't meekly just sort of shuffling. They walked out with their heads high, their chests out, a bit of a strut in their step. And they submit to inspection because, of course, everyone wants to know what had happened. And they found their hair was not singed, their clothing not scorched, and they didn't even smell of smoke from the ropes that burned away. I love the way the old King James says it. In verse 27, "And they saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power." So, as I like to do when I preach, I like to leave you some questions to take away and think about. And the first question is fairly obvious. What is the image that you're being told you should bow to? Is it that your Christian values are no longer relevant in the modern world? So you should just be quiet about your faith and keep it to yourself. It might sound something like, it's cool to believe whatever you want to believe, just don't be forcing your beliefs on the rest of us. Perhaps the image is that you're too young or too old or too insignificant to make a difference, so don't even try. Perhaps it's something as simple as everyone else is doing whatever the thing is that they're doing. You should just do it too and it'll be fine. Whatever image is being presented to you, you need to recognise it as an image and take your stand. The second question I want you to take away is, what will you do when you're called out? When someone realises that you're not bowing to the image like they are, they're going to call you out. They're going to call attention to you and say, look at them. They feel bad about it because they've given up in themselves and they want you to give up as well. So they're going to call you out. They're going to accuse you of thinking you're better than them or judging them. So what will you do when you're called out? Will you submit or will you stand? And the third question is, who are you standing with? It's so important. Who are the people that really know you, who know your weaknesses, who know your fears, who know what you've been through and have walked with you through it? We need these people. I need these people to support them. I need them to support me, and they need me to support them. Because you can't do it alone. The Bible talks about this in multiple places, about iron sharpening iron, so one man sharpens another. Even back in Deuteronomy, it talks about one putting 1,000 to flight, but two putting 10,000 to flight. Who are the people that you're standing with?